I mean, it's everything, right? We are so busy as farmers, and you know this well. And there's just very unique and specific needs that farms have, and it is just absolutely essential that we work together to pass legislation, to reform the USDA, to pass new bills at the state and local level to support the future of agriculture that we want to see, that is fair and just and supporting our planet. And no one farm can do that alone, right? They can tell their story, but it's a lot of work to get a bill passed, right? You need to have farmers in each and every community working together.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from Lindsey Lusher-Shute of Farmer Generations, who has designed an app called GrownBy that allows eaters to buy food directly from local farmers. Lindsey farms with her husband Ben at Hearty Roots in New York's Hudson Valley. If Lindsey's voice sounds familiar to you, she hosted the Young Farmers podcast and was the co-director of the National Young Farmers Coalition. I interviewed Lindsey to learn more about why she chose to shift her focus away from policy at NYFC towards Farm Generations and the creation of a farmer-owned online marketplace. I'm so excited to be at Hearty Roots Farm.
Welcome.
We first found out about Hearty Roots when you signed up for the Real Organic Project, and that was 3 years ago. You were part of the pilot project, and I met your husband, Benjamin. Do you want to just give us a little backstory of the farm?
Sure. Well, we are here at Hearty Roots, about 100 miles north of New York City, and Hearty Roots started just down the road here, originally on rented land, which we had to move from, and then we had another rented parcel, and then we finally were able to buy this beautiful property here, and we own 70 acres. We manage about 300 this year. We sell certified organic vegetables through community-supported agriculture to the Hudson Valley and New York City region. And we also have a farm store on site. Our CSA usually has about just over 1,000 families that join. And then it's been really cool to see locally here our farm store grow as well. And we also source in from a number of other farms, with livestock, with meat, local fruit, and the rest.
That's such a success story. What how many years has it been since you've been able to, since you got started?
Yeah, so we started the farm, I should say Ben really started the farm with another business partner in 2004.
Okay. And then when did National Young Farmers Coalition get started?
Right. So Ben has always been the full-time farmer in our family, and now we have a crew also of about 15 amazing farmers who work with us. And my role has always been doing advocacy and other sort of like related supported activities or activities in support of the farm. And so Young Farmers Coalition came about. He was full-time farming up here, and I was doing like policy and advocacy work in Albany and in New York City. And we were both together just experiencing the incredible challenges in trying to find farmland, in fact, and feeling like there was this incredible generation of young people just like us locally here and farmers we knew all across the country who didn't have the opportunity to actually put down roots and create a farm that was going to support them and their families as careers, as for their lifetime. And so Young Farmers Coalition officially came about in 2010 is when it was established. But we started organizing around 2009 with another local farmer here. And then we actually got things together and started officially in 2010.
Land access was our biggest problem getting started too. And look at the infrastructure that you have to set up when you're on rented land. You've
it's
got
impossible. Yeah, I mean, this actually, all of our infrastructure on our rented parcels, other than in our first place, we had a couple of barns that we were able to use that were already on the property, but we had everything under high tunnels, all of our wash pack, all of our cold storage, everything was like in a tent city, right? It was just like, temporary infrastructure that could be easily moved.
Well, not that easily.
Not that, I mean, that's absolutely true. But, it could be moved. And we, in fact, did move it when we eventually got our own land. But there's so many advantages in having land that we own. Like we, have underground irrigation, water lines. We're able to drill more wells as necessary. We have a farm store. We have farm worker housing. We have a wash pack that has a loading dock. I mean, it makes our workers more comfortable that, we never had a loading dock before, right? And when you're taking that much product down to New York City twice a week, that's a lot of effort for the team. So anyways, we are so grateful that we finally have land tenure.
I'm curious how many, you talk about kind of this next generation that wants to farm, and I've experienced that as well, being part of it, but also seeing how difficult it is. I'm curious, in your opinion, I've heard older farmers say, I've watched, farmers come and go throughout my career.
Yeah.
And one in how many kind of make it in terms of this is a career, and, if they're not making it, land access, what else is holding them back?
Well, there's a lot of top issues for farmers. When we started the coalition, what we heard most frequently was access to capital, which I think has been improved upon with microloans offered by USDA, the Young Farmers Coalition worked to get started. But land access is certainly like a top ranking issue. I mean, there's so many issues related to land access around just the price of land, the way that we acquire land, right? It's often through family transition or local networks that some farmers, because they're new to the area or because of cultural issues, there just may not be opportunity to establish those relationships that you need to kind of get the parcel that you want, right, to have the opportunity to be part of that transition. So land is certainly the most difficult issue that we see young farmers facing in this area. And since COVID, it's just gotten even worse. Like the reason we couldn't buy land here is because we are essentially competing with folks who have full-time jobs elsewhere. Like they work at a law firm or in New York City, or maybe they're a doctor, or maybe they do real estate. I don't know, whatever it may be, but it's a full-time off-farm job that supports their family and enables them to buy land at a price per acre that just makes absolutely no sense for a full-time working farmer. So the only way we were able to acquire this land is we worked in partnership with a land trust, Scenic Hudson, and another organization called Equity Trust that essentially bought the development and estate rights from this property that brought it down to what's considered an agricultural value where we can afford it. And because they've done that, we also have another thing called an option to purchase at ag value on this land. So we have committed that we will sell it to another working farmer, someone making more than 50% of their income through agriculture. But yeah, land access, there needs to be a lot more work done to ensure that all farmers, all young people have the opportunity to actually have land where you can build a successful farm operation.
One of the hiccups that we had with our land trust was that our acreage was only 6 acres. And when, where we are with water rights being so expensive,
right,
it can be $100,000 an acre for
right,
good water.
Right. And
we were trying to say we can produce a living we're only cultivating 3 of those acres. We can make a living. And the land trust just didn't see that as right, big enough to, make a living as a farm. And so are there other things that maybe the Land Conservancies and land trusts can be aware of in terms of other rules, that maybe keep these things from happening for small farms?
Yeah, well, in some cases we see land trusts actually just buy parcels outright and rent them back to a farm with sort of like a lifetime long-term lease. It's called a ground lease. So you own the infrastructure, you do the farming there, and then essentially they transfer the lease to another farmer. So sometimes that makes a little bit more sense for smaller parcels, but I think it's really like on the land trust community too to figure this out. And that's one of the things that we communicated and we continue to communicate through Young Farmers Coalition and for us as a farm is that land trusts that support agriculture, that want to be engaged in the agriculture space, they cannot ignore the affordability issue, right? It's not just the availability of open space, of land. It's like you need to make sure a farmer can be there because the farmer is obviously critical to the success of that piece of property as a farm, right? They're just as important as the open space. So many land trusts have made a lot of changes and have become very innovative in this way. But I think it's that partnership. Land trusts really need to engage with the farm community to understand what they need. And if 6 acres is an appropriate where you are, and that is a critical farm piece of land for the community to ensure secure local and secure food access, then it's just as important to secure those 6 acres as maybe 100 acres that are much farther, from an urban center.
So I just was listening to Perilous Bounty is what it was called, Tom Philippont on the way here. And he was talking about how all of the food basically is coming from California for our veggies and fruit, and the Midwest for corn, really to feed into meat production for CAFO meat. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why it's so important. If these systems are so efficient, right, and they're producing food so cheap, why not just let them keep doing it? Why is this movement so important for young farmers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's many excellent and important answers to that question, but I think the one that makes the most sense to our customers and the people who live around here, and sometimes just even us as farmers, is the way we provide food for our community, right? And those local connections that we have and those relationships. COVID was really a wake-up call for so many people here in the Hudson Valley when they went to their grocery store and suddenly those efficient systems were completely broken, right? And because they were not nimble enough to switch over to direct markets and provide food for the communities that all around the country that were depending on them, right? And so then we saw many of our neighbors suddenly look to our farm store and many other local food outlets like ours and say, "Oh, you still have food available. There's lamb that's grown right here. There's beef that's grown right here. There's vegetables that are grown right here, and we want to support that." And we suddenly can make that connection. This is why we need to have local farms. So I think immediately that's the thing that really matters. Is you have to have small farms all across the country that are supporting local markets to ensure food security. And I think that the big problems are real, right? We need to deal with climate change. About 4 years ago, we had a storm come through Hearty Roots Farm, our farm. We had about 90% crop loss.
I remember seeing pictures of a river running through your shed.
It was wild. I mean, all of these high tunnels, all of the plastic was completely destroyed. We had, hail that was larger than golf balls that, went through all the way through the plastic, right? And we had crop loss in the fields, of course, as well as early in the season. And what saved us is that our CSA members basically came to the farm and helped us clean up, right? They They helped us take off the plastic. Other farmers came back and helped us put it back on, plant more seedlings. I mean, it was really a community effort to get things back, but it just goes to show like why these systems of small farms and community-based agriculture is so critical, because number one, our farm as a certified organic farm, a farm that is working to fight climate change by, the cover crop that you see planted right behind you, right? Like we are dedicated. I mean, this is a good practice just for our farm, right? To improve our soil fertility, but it's also sequestering carbon, right? This is something that truly matters to us. But beyond that, we also have a community of people that, as we are dealing with the effects of climate change right now, are also here to help us and support us and be resilient within this moment.
Do you think it's going to take these episodes of shock kind of in order for, because we saw a ton of increase in sales when COVID hit, so not last April, but the one before. And I hate to say it, but our sales are back where they were before because everybody's going back to the grocery store now. Yeah. So I'm curious if you've experienced that too, and if you think that it's going to take the shock to the system in order for people to kind of, I guess the question is, are people going to remember the shock?
That's a good question.
And have the foresight enough to know that it's going to happen again. So in good times for California, when there is water, that I should still support my local farms because there will be a future shock again, whether it's water or weather. Do you think that memory is there, or do you think that people just want convenience?
I think people do really want convenience, and I think that there are other pressures that are on families these days that sort of make convenience sometimes outrank everything else. But I don't think it's lost on anyone how important local agriculture and agriculture that is slowing the effects of climate change, how important that is. But I think that we have to sort of meet in the middle, right? We need, as a farm community, to make it easier for people to find our products, right? And we need to sort of add that we can create convenience. We have tons of selection, right? And if we can bring more farmers on, we can even create more. And I think that if we can provide those things for consumers, we can grow the market that exists to this day. I mean, it's unfortunate to hear that people haven't, kept those buying habits up. We have seen that actually. It's not like COVID where it's, people are sort of like panic buying essentially, right? But since COVID, we have had much stronger sales at our farm store for our CSA ongoing, because I think people do remember, both how important it is to support local agriculture ongoing, but I think they also just enjoyed the experience of being part of a CSA and coming to the farm store and, finding something really special. So, yeah, I think that we can't just assume that these shocks are going to be enough. Like, we have to really understand what consumers are looking for, and an individual farm can't on their own necessarily provide everything that a consumer is going to want to compete with a major grocery store chain or something like that, particularly, or an Amazon doing delivery, right? But I think that there are opportunities as a community to come together, and Real Organic Project, I think, is one of those where the entire community of small farms doing this really important agriculture that's so good for our communities and so good for our world are communicating their value and making it easier for consumers to shop in this way.
It's a little bit about the agriculture in the middle, because it's wonderful you've been able to kind of direct market and have a huge CSA. There are some barriers for everybody to be able to do that. So it's can we find a way into the grocery store where it is convenient for people? And people do want to just have a one-stop who are so busy. But a lot of times that shelf space isn't available for small farms. And I even was told at Natural Grocers that there was like a myth of the small farm to actually provide products. And I think the reality is, and you know, you can share your opinion if you agree with this or not, but that a lot of times we're kind of pushed into the realm of direct marketing and maybe keep our farms small enough so that we don't depend on these really fickle wholesale markets that can just drop us at a dime or don't even give us access in the first place. And so I'm curious if you think there is a need for wholesale for, you know, small farms and kind of mid-scale regional farms to get into that grocery store space. And if direct sales are limiting the growth of the movement in some way, and that, you know, there's only so many sales you can make at a local farmer's market or so many CSA shares in a community. And so what is the importance of access to those wholesale markets for the growth of our movement?
Yeah, well, I would push back a little bit on the limitations of direct sales. I mean, a lot of people say that, like, you know, as long as we do sales in this way directly, there's only a very small fraction of consumer population in the U.S. that is going to buy a CSA share. Okay, fine. But I think that that's the CSA share that is, you know, you have to pay all up front and you have to come at this time during the week or it's over. You know, like we can innovate CSA, right? We can make CSA a much friendlier and easier experience for that comes closer to modern consumer expectations. And I think if we're able to do that, we will be able to attract a larger audience to community-supported agriculture alone, like not even thinking about farm stores or other direct sales. One of the reasons that I've been working on the Farm Generations Cooperative and GrownBy is to do exactly that, recognizing the importance of direct sales and using technology to actually make direct sales a much more comparable and convenient and fun experience for the consumer, where at our CSA this year, if you can't make your share one week, you can put it on vacation and then you get credit, you know, for a future purchase. That you can switch locations. If you can't get to one location, you can get to another location. And eventually, GrownBy, we want to incorporate home delivery and shipping and all the things that a consumer sort of expects these days. So I think that we shouldn't just assume direct sales will, you know, be this sort of narrow model that only attracts a limited number of consumers. Because if we do make that assumption, then yeah, it's not going to get us anywhere, right? Beyond where we are today. But if we can come together and think about how do we innovate, how do we come closer to consumer expectations, how do we as a community compete, then I think there's an immense possibility to bring more consumers in. I mean, Gen Z, millennials, like they are wanting to buy from alternative outlets. They're wanting to buy from small farms. They're wanting to put their money towards causes and purchases that are supporting the environment and fighting climate change. And that's exactly what we're all doing. So it's a matter of making those connections and making it just convenient and accessible enough to more people. But I think the wholesale question is a good one. And I don't know that I have a perfect answer for it, but I'll tell you that our experience at Hearty Roots has been that if we were to sell to an aggregator, there used to be an aggregator just up the road here, specifically for certified organic products, and the price list, like what they would pay you per pound for, you know, lettuce mix or whatever it might be, was based on California prices, right? Like highly scaled operations, operating year round, right? We have a limited season here, which of course impacts, you know, our prices and the like. So that model, like that's not a model that we want to be a part of. That's not a model that helps us pay our workers a fair wage. That's not a model that supports us taking care of our land in the way that we want to. So I think that there likely is potential there for more small farms, more mid-scale farms, which we truly are, to sell to that wholesale market. But it has to be done at a fair price, right? You have to have a model that recognizes how farms like these are run, the costs that we incur in our production, and be able to recognize those costs in the prices that you're giving farmers.
One of the things that we found is that a lot of the people shopping at the grocery stores do want the local organic products,
right,
and they do want the ability to buy them at the grocery store. But often it's just not there. That opportunity just isn't there to purchase it. So let's talk about GrownBy. We're kind of switching here from policy action to direct, like, in my life, here's how I can create real change. Why did that happen for you to kind of make that switch towards policy and advocacy to here's something I can do myself and my community to help build the movement?
Yeah, well, I love policy and advocacy, and I will always be doing that for my entire life, even though that's not what I'm doing full time these days. But for me, I really became worried about just the influence of technology generally, but in particular on small farms, and feeling as though our farm and other farms like it just couldn't be completely dependent on a company that we had no control over, right? A company building technology for our farm, on behalf of our farm, that we had no say in the cost, like the price of that technology, how our data was going to be used, even part of figuring out what the future of that technology should be. It felt like there was significant risk in our farm, sort of, putting all of our data with one company or another and not feeling, totally secure in that decision. And this was informed by our own experience, where we were selling our experience in other farms too, unfortunately, where we were selling CSA shares with this one software platform, and then that, I guess, wasn't a very profitable sort of line of business for that company, and so then they became an aggregator, and were actually selling like aggregated CSA shares right next to us as we were selling like direct CSA shares, and so became our competitor while we were also doing business with them, which was really weird. There was another company that was buying a lot of product from farmers around here. Everyone was really excited initially, and then they just and this actually happened again this summer, they just closed up shop without telling any of the farmers. The farmers had fields of produce ready to be delivered, feeling like they had really made a good deal for that season, and the company just said, see you later, this isn't working out for us, without giving any compensation to those farms at all. So if farmers need technology, right? Like, we need to innovate. We need, as we were just talking about, we need to make this direct model a fair model, whatever that may entail, if it's wholesale and direct. It has to be fair to the farmer. And I just don't believe that we are going to get that outcome unless farmers are owners of the technology company, because we are the only ones who can guarantee that there will be that long-term, transparent and fair relationship that is really necessary for a farm to take the risk of putting all of your products, on one platform or another, and keeping track of your data over time, and making sure that that company is really working in your long-term interests. So that's where I was coming from. And when I was at Young Farmers Coalition, essentially what happened is that we were doing these long-term campaigns around the Farm Bill and other, state and local work. And while we were making progress, and particularly at the agency level, feeling like, oh my gosh, these farmers are just this year are not making enough money, right? What can we do so we can help today? And we surveyed the entire membership of the coalition, and actually the opportunity for technology to help was just made very clear, both in the very few number of farmers at that time that were using anything to sort of manage their sales and marketing, and also just some of the poor practices that people communicated to us among the companies that were already out there, just not working as good partners with the farms. So Young Farmers Coalition started the Farmer Generations Cooperative. We organized it. From there, the coalition incubated the co-op, and then we sort of built this initial technology, GrownBy, and in 2019, the co-op officially spun off from Farm Generations, and we built GrownBy, which is an app that essentially manages direct sales for farmers, both custom orders and CSA, and eventually we will do wholesale as well. Mostly with like an eye on local outlets like the restaurant or the school or institution that wants to buy from a farm, and then eventually at some point delivery and shipping as well. But right now it's all for in-person sales.
Okay, and so you said there's a 2.0 coming out. What's the difference here?
So we released so when technology has versions. Every version, is reflecting what you learned from the last version and making changes and improvements. So we came out with this beta in 2020. We had 18 farms that tested it with us. We came out with a 1.0 that was finally an app available in the App Store and Google Play Store this past March. And Hearty Roots has been using it for all of our customers, and there are about 67 farms that are now using GrownBy for their farm sales. We learned a ton, and now we're putting the 2.0 out before winter. That's all I'm going to say.
It's coming.
It's
winter is coming.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the 2.0 is that consumers are going to be able to find farms. Right now, you kind of have to go directly to the farm shop linked. The farm has to say, go here and shop here, although you can do some discovery. But the 2.0 version is going to allow consumers to shop for, if they want local greens or, local kale or something like that, they can shop for, they can type in kale, they can find all the farms around them that are participating, that are offering kale, and then you can filter by certification. So hopefully we'll have real organic project included there, but right now, in the future, but right now we have organic. So you can, as a consumer, show me all the organic kale available, right? And then where it's available presently for pickup at a farmer's market or through a CSA or the like. But yeah, the key thing that we're excited to offer farms like ours is discovery, right? Consumers, I mean, and I've experienced this too. It's like, should I go to the farmer's market to make my meal plans for the week or even dinner tonight, but I don't really necessarily know what's there. Whereas if you go to the grocery store, you know they're always going to have chicken, they're always, whatever it may be that you're looking for, they'll have all of the things. Whereas a farmer's market, it's just, you just don't necessarily know who's going to have what. And what you'll be able to do in the 2.0 version of GrownBy is to search for the ingredients that you want and be able to actually shop ahead of the farmer's market, make a pre-order and reserve the things that you want and go pick it up there or at another location. But it it just makes the discovery of new farms and farm products much more accessible and easy. You don't have to physically go to the farm or even know what farm you want to buy from. I mean, I think that's the other thing too. It's unless a consumer might know Hearty Roots, but there's a few other farms around here also that have really great products, but they might not ever shop from those farms just because they've never heard of them before. So enabling this product search where you can just look for an ingredient, I think will be a huge help.
We found that even just coming together with our group of farmers and planning out our season and what we were going to grow to meet the local markets was so huge in terms of just not growing stuff that then couldn't sell. I'm wondering what your thoughts on cooperation are in terms of the success of the young farmer movement.
I mean, it's everything, right? We are so busy as farmers, and you know this well. And there's just very unique and specific needs that farms have, and it is just absolutely essential that we work together to pass legislation, to reform the USDA, to pass new bills at the state and local level to support the future of agriculture that we want to see, that is fair and just and supporting our planet. And no one farm can do that alone, right? They can tell their story, but it's a lot of work to get a bill passed, right? You need to have farmers in each and every community working together. So that is essential, and it's such a rewarding experience. It's certainly, at least has been for me through Young Farmers Coalition, to just have this community of farms all across the country and farmers that are my friends and I keep up with, and there's this shared sense of like pain and opportunity and excitement and jokes, and it makes, I think, the farm experience feel much bigger, right? I mean, sometimes you're like, is this chore done, or just the stress of the day is one thing on your own farm, but to have this broader community, I think is a really exciting and rewarding thing for any farmer. And in Farm Generations, it's a very similar type of thing that we are just at the beginning of building. So the Farm Generations Cooperative is an agricultural cooperative. We actually chose to incorporate in the state of Minnesota, one of a few states that has a specific set of laws on cooperatives and agricultural cooperatives, meaning that farmers are the only individuals right now, and we're likely to expand this to employees down the road, but farmers are the owners of the company. So that was really important to me, that farmers are going to make the final vote, right, on what the company is doing. And right now, any farmer who joins GrownBy, sets up a shop and makes a sale on the platform can become an owner member of the Farm Generations Cooperative and actually have like equity in the future of the company. And someday down the road, when we're profitable, they'll actually have profit sharing too. So it's different than advocacy, being a participant in a co-op, but there's a lot of similarities too. It's this recognition that we need to come together as a community, and there's so much more that we can accomplish together, but also it's a lot of fun, and it's just an important thing as a farmer to engage in the broader, bigger conversation.
Going back to policy, we've got the Farm Bill coming up. I have a lot of concerns with the climate initiatives, pretty much worried that, all the carbon credits are going to go to, business as usual.
Right.
Does National Young Farmers Coalition have any thoughts on, what to do with carbon farming and, how organic farmers that have been sequestering carbon for decades can benefit?
I couldn't answer specifically for Young Farmers Coalition. I don't know, just honestly, what their policy platform is specifically on carbon sequestration. But I think that there is a ton of risk in that small farmers will be left out, because it's less efficient to calculate the amount of carbon that we're sequestering here at Hearty Roots through our management practices than it would be on a much larger operation with thousands of acres, right? That is planting cover crops. So I think it's incredibly important that small farmers engage and we figure out systems to reward small farms like Hearty Roots and many, many others that are doing great work, that they can be part of that. And also the consumers can make the connection that it's not just these faraway operations that are sequestering carbon, but it's just this farm up the road that also has some excellent practices that are of huge benefit. I think it's like that with anything, right? If small farmers don't say that we're here, it's really important that you recognize our needs in policy, then policy will always drift towards the big guys, right? It's easier. it's much easier to meet certain goals on larger operations, because you're dealing with it's just less complicated, right? You're dealing with fewer farmers, fewer intermediaries, et cetera, et cetera.
Simpler systems.
It's a uniform system. So that's, again, where advocacy comes in. And it's, the same thing that we saw with USDA and the microloans, is that they were like, okay, we have to get this much money out the door for loans, and it's easier to loan to fewer farmers as opposed to many farmers through smaller loan packages. And it's that conversation needs to be had over and over and over again with any initiative that's certainly put in place by the federal government, but also local and state entities too. It's so important for small farmers to stick their necks out and say, this is why this is important, and remind lawmakers, because oftentimes they just don't know, the impacts that they're having, and they won't necessarily take the time to find out.
Yeah, I saw the same thing happening with the kind of the open space land trust. They wanted to show the number of acres.
Right.
And often it was land that wasn't even under pressure of development.
Right.
And so small acreage under large pressure of development was ignored for these kind of larger acres. So anyway, yes, the small farms really do. And we do not have money and power, right? So only in coalition can we have a loud enough voice. Mm-hmm. Would you talk a little bit about kind of building the movement for 40 plus chapters across the country? It's very impressive, and I know you're going to do the same with GrownBy now.
Well, it was an adventure, and I would do it again, and hopefully we will be able to build the same momentum with the Farmer Generations Cooperative. So really, at the start, I was volunteering, working from our farm office, and then we were with Ben and Severin, who were the other co-founders of the coalition, and all of us was just like a passion project, right? I had another job that gave me health insurance and sort of like enough income to get by, and Ben was farming, and it was really just like starting conversations, right? And the thing that brought us together was a problem that kept us up at night, which was, how do we make sure that young people can farm in the future, right? How can we make sure that young people aren't going to have to give up on their farming dreams, and all of their good ideas, all the innovation, all the things that they want to see on the land can come into fruition, can become reality, and we have to be part of that change. And so just presenting that problem and talking about that problem to more and more farmers just got other people also, I think, staying up at night, and thinking like, oh wow, like that's a problem we can solve, actually. Like that's something that we should be able to work on together. So it was a ton of travel, meeting farmers in place on their farms, at conferences. We were really lucky to find Sophie Ackoff, who was one of the first organizers for the coalition, and she's just like an amazing organizer. And I did a lot of travel, but she did about twice as much as I did, going all around the country and just asking farmers to be part, just inviting them in, telling our story and asking them to tell theirs too, either to a member of Congress, to a group of local farmers, to start a chapter, and it's grown from there. And it's been so exciting to see the coalition evolve and take on new issues. They have an incredible new focus on racial equity, which is something that is so needed across the space. And it's been pretty amazing to see young farmers take a leadership role in that work as well. So yeah, I mean, it's just like time and patience and dedication, and like a problem that just has to be solved, I guess,
Yeah, we've only had success that way as well. You can't expect a farmer who is so busy already to come come to you. You have to come to their farm.
Right.
And if you're lucky, they'll give you an hour. But
Yeah.
that's the way we can amplify farmer voice is only by going to the farm. Do you have any thoughts for, I've visited some farms and say, I just want to farm. I don't want to be political.
Yeah.
What is the importance of joining a movement to see the success of smaller diversified farms?
Well, I mean, it's in terms of policy, it is absolutely critical, because so much of what we deal with at Hearty Roots is rules that have been written by somebody else that we are complying with, right? With whether it's food safety or we are a certified organic farm, so National Organic Program. And so to just say, we're just going to farm, you don't just farm. You farm within a structure that is oftentimes set or influenced by individuals that have no clue the experience of a small farmer day to day. So just in terms of policy, it is essential that farmers are part of those conversations and very active participants in those conversations, because otherwise their interests will not necessarily be included in whatever rule or law is being written. And I think like the larger movement, the Real Organic Project, is, I guess, a response, right, to organic being a label that no longer met the expectations and practices, the high standard of practices that farmers were putting in place. I mean, obviously soil being the number one thing. And so until that is something that may be recognized by, in a federal law or label like organic, it's really important, I think, for the consumer and for lawmakers in the future to see that there is this movement of farmers that is doing things differently and wants to stick by that, and really, has a higher standard for production that's incorporating all of these other things.
One of the things that was said to us when we were talking about specific standards that we felt were being lost was, we're not here to preserve a way of life.
Right.
This is about, efficiency again. It's more efficient to just, purchase from these larger things. And what you're doing is, these small farms are just a way of life. My response was, well, we should have a right to that way of life. That should be part of the story, right? But other farmers felt, no, this is about just practices, and as long as we enforce the practices, then it doesn't matter how large the farms are, or how much consolidation there is, as long as these practices are being preserved. So it's kind of an interesting internal conversation. Is organic a way of life, or is it the production practices are enough? And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that one. Is it okay to protect a way of life?
I mean, yeah, I think that, that's a really good question. It's funny that you bring that up. I remember being at a conference one time, and like someone was trying to make the distinction between production farmers and like lifestyle farmers or something like that, which really irked me, just because I know the farms that they were talking about, which are just smaller operations, right? And it's not like those farmers were working any less hard, right? They were working 80 hours a week probably, but because they made different choices to operate at a smaller scale, to serve their local community, to have a higher standard of production, or a different type of production, that somehow they were like less than, right? And much of what leads to success in organic farming and smaller scale farming, and that's with plants and particularly with animals, is just that sort of ability to observe and just be present on the farm, right? In a way that a totally mechanized system just sort of takes that out of the farmer's hands, right? And so I think that there's a lot to be said for encouraging farmers who want to be part of their farm and the land that they're with in that way, which I don't know if the way of life is necessarily. I mean, I guess it is, right? It's like we are farming in a way that we feel like we are working in full partnership with the land, and that is very meaningful to us, and it's very meaningful to our customers as well to see that, and for them also to experience that, to be out on the land and have the opportunity to engage with it in that way. So, I mean, at the end of the day, what can be written into law is like practices, right? And so you have to get as close as you can to that, within the rules. But sort of on a broader level, I think it's very important for us as farmers to try to protect this way of life, both in educating our consumers, bringing them into that experience, and also teaching the next generation of farmers and young people to understand the value of partnering with the land in this way, right? And I think that to me, all the farms that are part of the Real Organic Project, it seems like that's part of their value system, right? Is working with the land in a way that feels very, very positive. So legislation can only do so much, right? Like protection of whatever, the laws only get you so far. Beyond that, it's really about connection and community, and passing that on to the next generation, making sure that working with the land, farming in this way is part of something that the next generation will value and think is cool and want to carry on to their kids.
Yeah, that's a good answer. The question is so related to the dairy crisis right now, with Danone, who owns Horizon, dropping 89 contracts in Maine and Vermont and kind of northern New England and shifting to western New York. Now, all of those organic farms 50 new contracts in western New York are meeting organic standards as well. What is being lost when we just kind of let places that, maybe 20 cows, so it's not as efficient to go to as many stops, or it's, a longer route to pick up the milk? What are we at risk of losing if we just say, well, it's more efficient to go here?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've, in our farm history, we've worked with a number of dairy farmers who, by renting their land or whatnot. And actually the first piece of land that we were on was owned by the Bulkley family, and they were their land was used for a dairy. I don't know, I think maybe at most they had 50 cows at one point. So they represented, the type of farm that was just dropped. And eventually they actually discouraged their kids from getting into agriculture because of the lack of profitability. And I think that they saw that future ahead, right? Like you have to be at a certain scale to succeed. But it's that same kind of thing. Like they had such a deep connection with their land. They had been farming for multiple generations on that property, deep connection with their land, deep connection with their animals, and so much knowledge to pass down to the next generation. And also they're just like a pillar of their community, right? Like everyone, know this is a dairy farm. This is part of our place in our town. So it's really unfortunate to think that a company completely divorced from that local meaning, those local connections, can have such an impact on the success of a small farm. Locally here, there's a cooperative called the Hudson Valley Fresh that developed sort of in response, because they didn't want to be beholden to these contracts, and so they they organized together to create, their own system of distribution, which has been very successful. And I hope to see more of that, right? That producers can find a way to have success outside of the contracts, contracts being renewed or not, that they have their own strength as a community.
Are we succeeding? It feels like we're up against such massive money and power. And, how do we move beyond education to actually dismantling the system? And are we succeeding at that?
We have more work to do, right? I mean, let's be honest. If I said, yeah, we're succeeding, then I feel like we would be done or something. Just the market share for local food, and not even organic food, right, is just so small compared to what it could be. And until I begin to see that really increase across the country, that, more folks in the US are able to buy local food, buy organic food, buy real organic food, right? Then we're making progress, but we really need to see those numbers change to feel like we're making progress and we've sort of achieved some sort of success. But I think I am very hopeful. I mean, there are so many incredible young farmers out there today that want to make a difference, young people who are, saying, I want to farm, I want to be part of this change. There's incredible organizations that are behind it. So I think there's the community there, there's the people there to do more and to change things. But there's a lot of work ahead of us to make that a reality.
Would you say that the two themes today seem to me to be land access and market access? Would you say those are kind of the two things to keep plowing away at?
There's a lot of things, right? We need to work on land access. We need to improve market access for farms at a smaller scale. We also need to address racial equity to ensure that more farmers, more folks are able to become owner-operators and to be in the position of owning land, managing land. So we need to deal with the student debt crisis, which is something that just keeps coming up over and over again for farmers who go to college for agriculture and then actually can't afford to farm because they're paying back their student debt and can't take on more loans. So there are issues there, right? But we know them. We know there are solutions to addressing these. And the question is how do we engage the farm community at large? How do we engage the American consumer community to partner with us to solve those issues and help them understand why they need to be part of this movement to preserve and to accelerate and expand agriculture that's supports our planet, supports our country, supports our families in so many important ways.
Lindsey, thank you for your work and your time today, and
we'll
do it again.
It was great to have you here.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. We hope that you will subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a rating and review. Please join us next time when our guest is Mark McAfee of the Raw Milk Institute and Organic Pastures Dairy in Fresno, California. To support this podcast and our certified farms, become a recurring donor at realorganicproject.org and get the benefits of being a real friend, including our book club where you can ask our favorite authors your questions. See you next time.